Good evening, Your Excellency, President Bauer, distinguished guests, our distinguished panelists here in Jakarta and in Singapore, and a good morning to our panelists in Washington, D.C. I'm not sure, I don't see them on the screen yet. I see very little. Okay. The Carnegie Endowment and the Rajaratnam School of International Studies. The title of today's event is The Changing Strategic and Economic Landscape of Southeast Asia. The subject of our panel today focuses on one of the world's most dynamic regions. Southeast Asia is a complex but yet exciting region that is undergoing impressive socio-economic and political development, as well as facing key challenges among the states as well as within the states. Some of the key questions that we hope to address during today's video conference deals with both the strategic and economic issues. For example, how is Southeast Asia external security environment likely to evolve? What role will China and the US play in the region? What are the security prospects for cooperation between ASEAN member states as well as between ASEAN and its global security partners? How will the process of regional integration evolve over time? From our economists in the panel, we would also like to hear their perspective on the socio-economic and environmental challenges faced by Southeast Asian states. How will the ASEAN Economic Community in 2015 and beyond redefine the regional and global trade structures? Evolve? And which of the two do the panelists here believe has a greater chance of success? We would also hope to cover the subject of environmental sustainability and effects of climate change on the region. These are just some of the issues that we hope to hear during today's panel discussion. I would now like to introduce our panelists. I will start with the panelists here in Jakarta. On the far left, we have Bu Dewi Fortuna Anwar, who's a senior advisor to the Indonesian Vice President. We have, on my left, Dr. Samsu Raharja. He's a senior economist at the World Bank here in Indonesia. In Singapore, we have Leonard Sebastian, who is the coordinator of the Indonesian program at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies. We also have Professor Pradumna Rana, who is replacing the previous guest speaker. He's an associate professor at RSIS and a coordinator for the economic multilateralism and regionalism studies at RSIS. From across the Pacific, we have Vikram Nehru, who's the senior associate in the Asia program and a Bakrie chair in Southeast Asian Studies at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. We also have Douglas Paul, who's the vice president of Study Department. Just a quick technical overview. Each of our panelists is given 5 minutes of speaking time, after which we will have Vikram, who will try to give the opening statements for today's video conference. Vikram?
Well, thank you very much, Pak Aziz. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, terrific. And a warm welcome to all of you from a very frigid Washington morning. I want to start by commending the Bakrie Center Foundation for organizing this session, this very ambitious event, which brings together outstanding experts from Jakarta, Singapore, and Washington. I would like to thank all the panelists for taking the time to come today, but especially to my two Washington colleagues who had to wake up very early this morning to make it here on time, and to it's a Monday morning. The topic, changing strategic and economic landscape of Southeast Asia, is timely, given very rapidly evolving events around the world. The reality is that we live in a globalized, interdependent world, and events in one half of the world can impact lives on the other. And this is particularly so for Southeast Asia, which is the most open economic region in the world in terms of trade and capital flows, and this has been one of the region's traditional strengths. It has been an important driver of the region's impressive economic performance. But it has also been one of the region's traditional vulnerabilities. with external economic and political shocks rapidly transmitted through trade and capital flow channels to domestic economies. To Southeast Asia's credit, policymakers have worked to make their economies more resilient, but have broadly maintained relatively open economies at the same time. Now, the global economy has just been through the Great Recession and is now at the cusp of a recovery, with signs of accelerating growth in the advanced countries, particularly in the United States of America, and growth in developing countries, including Southeast Asia, while still weak, now appears to be firming. But there remain risks within and outside the Southeast Asia region, which is going to affect Southeast Asia's future. And these risks, I think, will be the focus of today's discussion. So let me just quickly outline some of these risks as I see them. The first are the risks from outside the region. We already had a taste of how the so-called tapering of US monetary policies, especially their quantitative easing policies, could create turmoil in developing countries, including in Indonesia and other parts of Southeast Asia. And the process of tapering, which is only now beginning, has a long way to run with potential for further risks, twists and turns. Second, the slowdown and potential vulnerabilities of China always give cause for concern, in part because of their impact on commodity prices, which are of critical importance to commodity-dependent economies in Southeast Asia, such as Indonesia. And third, perhaps most importantly, are the worrying developments in the East and South China Seas, where strategic rivalry between China, a rising global power, and the United States, the existing global superpower, is giving rise to heightened tensions, and where the slightest miscalculation on either side could give rise to a potential conflict. So notwithstanding events in the Middle East, many analysts consider the East and South China Seas now as one of the world's most dangerous flashpoints. But there are risks from within the region as well, from within Southeast Asia as well. The rapid growth in Southeast Asia of the last decade has left legacies that give cause for concern. And arguably the most important one that I would like to highlight is rising inequality. The battles on the streets of Bangkok where democracy is under siege, the battles in the streets of Cambodia between factory workers and the government, and even some of the minimum wage agitations in Indonesia reflect in part the reverberations of rising inequality in all these countries. Second, the rapid growth of the past has left other challenges too: infrastructure shortfalls, growing environmental deficits, and rising government and corporate debt burdens. And finally, Southeast Asia, as Aziz has already mentioned, is the center of attention because it is at the intersection of three multilateral trade initiatives. The ASEAN Economic Community, which is to come into being at the end of 2015, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which has just gotten, the negotiations for which have just gotten started, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Will these initiatives be complementary to each other to support the economic growth of the region, or will they be competitive tools in the superpower rivalry that is emerging in the region? So these, in my view, are the big issues confronting the region. The time is momentous, and which highlights the timeliness of this very important discussion. With those opening remarks, Pak Aziz, may I pass the mic back to you in Jakarta.
Thank you very much for your interesting, thoughtful remarks. I would like to start with our panelists here in Jakarta, and I would like to give the word to Dewi.
Thank you, terima kasih, Pak Aziz Malik. Hello everybody, I'm very happy to be back here. Good morning to Vikram, Subham and Douglas in Washington. I'm very glad I'm not there, but you should also be glad you're not in Jakarta because we've just had flooding. And I just came back from Jogja, and yesterday I had experienced earthquake, so we have our shares of disasters here as well. And I'm happy to see Leonard and Dr. Rana in Washington, in Singapore. Both Pak Aziz and Pak Vikram has already outlined the very broad issues. So I would like just to pick a number of points, which I think also bears more attention. First on, I'm not an economist, I know Subam, who is an ex-World Bank as well, and we have Samsu here also from the World Bank. So there's one thing that also needs to be emphasized. The dynamics in Southeast Asia comes from both internal happenings as well as external dynamics, as what Bakrie mentions. And there are some important dynamics that are in fact shaping Southeast Asia to the better. The first here is, for a long time, Southeast Asia suffered from democratic deficit. It was always under international watch that there are more people living under authoritarian regimes in Southeast Asia than those who are living under a democracy. Now, we are having, this is a bit worrying. In Indonesia, we are going to have our general election this year. We are going to have a level of uncertainty because this is truly a changing of government. We have no idea who will actually win the elections or who will become the president, although there are some surveys. The questions will be, to what extent will the new government in Indonesia focuses as much attention to foreign policy issues? Whether there'll be much more inward-looking or whether there'll be more focusing also on international issues. The President SBY, as you know, takes foreign policy as as a main agenda. He enjoys traveling. He enjoys performing in regional and international fora. And in fact, to be honest, he's often more popular outside than inside, especially when you're becoming a lame duck president that happens as well. So this is also a number of uncertainty. Will Indonesia continues to be a driver, for example, in regional cooperation, in ASEAN chairmanship over regional security? Now, my own feeling is that Indonesia will continue to do so. But to what extent and whether the president will play a hands-on role or not, that is something that remains uncertain. We have a plus point in terms of democracy in Myanmar. I've just come back from Myanmar. I came back a few days ago when we had a very long discussion, serious discussion about security sector reform. Myanmar looks to Indonesia to assist it in its democratic transition and also in reforming its military, in taking the military out of politics. And this is a very positive development, but this is still at a very early stage. But at the same time, we have the downside, the happenings in Bangkok. That is truly a major setback for democratic consolidation in Southeast Asia. Because Thailand used to be at the leading edge in its democratic movement within Southeast Asia, within ASEAN. But now, I'm afraid it is no longer the case. So we have to see, given the fact that ASEAN community will supposed to be realized in 2015, when we have so many dynamic changes within ASEAN itself, to what extent will ASEAN be able to have a more coherent policy? Countries that are expected to be in the lead, like Bangkok and Jakarta. Jakarta, I hope that there is not going to be too much of a shock. But the extent to which the ASEAN capitals will actually be able to devote themselves, to the issues that are first consolidating the ASEAN integration itself, and then secondly having a more coherent approach towards the external powers. We know, for example, what happened after Indonesia took up the chairmanship of ASEAN. Indonesia was able to manage to push the agreement on the terms of reference on the declaration of on the South China Sea and pushing toward the code of conduct. But when it moved to Cambodia, we saw ASEAN in this array, and for the first time in ASEAN history, it failed to come to an agreement. Now we have to see that Myanmar will be the chair of ASEAN this year. This is a very new country, still learning the rope in regional integration, and it has some problems in capacity, for example. To what extent will it be able to carry out that burden?